Dark clouds loomed over the city that afternoon, but outside Mercy General Hospital, a real storm had already begun. A little girl, no older than 6, stood on the hot asphalt, shaking, her sky-blue dress streaked with dust, her small face stained with tears. Her voice quivered as she tried to speak, but her cries were drowned beneath the sound of traffic and the cruel laughter of 3 men standing guard at the hospital gate. She pointed a small shaking finger towards the glass doors, where her mother, pale and gasping for air, was being held back. Her plea cut through the air like a knife. They won't let my mommy in. If you believe that kindness still has the power to change the world, if you believe good hearts still rise when darkness tries to swallow them, then take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Real Kindness Stories. Because what happened next will remind you exactly why humanity is still worth believing in. Her name was Sophie Turner, a little girl too young to understand cruelty, yet old enough to recognize fear. Her mother, Laura, had spent months working double shifts at a small diner, trying to save up for the medication that kept her alive. That morning, Laura collapsed onto the floor of their small apartment, and Sophie, terrified but brave, grabbed her mother's hand and ran into the street, begging for help. But fate had other plans. The main entrance of the hospital was under renovation, and the only gate that was open was being guarded by 3 construction workers, men whose hearts were as cold as the steel they worked with. To them, she was an inconvenience, not a dying woman. "Wait for shift change," one of them sneered, as if her pain meant nothing. Sophie pulled at their sleeves, crying, pleading with them to move, but they laughed. One of them, tall, in a grey sleeveless hoodie, a cigarette dangling from his lips, waved her off like a fly. Another man was leaning against the wall, recording the scene on his phone, as if this was something amusing. The third one, heavier, wearing a red flannel shirt, said coldly, "People like her can wait." And with every jeer, Laura's breathing worsened. She stumbled once, then again. Before collapsing against the glass doors, her hand pressed weakly to her chest. Sophie screamed for help, but nobody came. A few people nearby looked away, pretending they didn't see. Then it happened. A low, thunderous sound echoed down the street, faint at first, then growing louder. The unmistakable roar of motorcycle. The laughter stopped. 5 powerful bikes rolled to a slow stop, just a few meters away, engines growling, sunlight glinting off chrome. And when the engines finally quieted, the only sound was the click of cooling metal and the heavy sound of boots on pavement. Leading the group was a man who seemed carved from steel and storm clouds. Ryder Callan, in his late 40s, his face weathered by time and road dust. A grey-streaked beard framed eyes that had seen too much, those eyes sharp enough to cut through lies and fear alike. He was attired in a black leather vest, worn from miles of wind and rain, with only 2 simple patches stitched on the back, Hell's Angels and RLS Chill. His gaze swept the scene, from the terrified child to the heartless men, to the woman who was collapsing against the door. For one long moment, the world stood still. Sophie took a shaking step nearer to him. "Please," she said in a whisper. "They won't let my mommy in the hospital." Ryder squatted down, the leather of his vest groaning as he met her at eye level. The reflection of her tear-streaked face shimmered in his mirrored sunglasses, and something in his expression changed. Ryder straightened up slowly, and in that one moment, the air was somehow different. His eyes, cold steel a second before, blazed now with silent fury. Not having said a word, he handed his gloves to one of his men, turned toward the hospital, and started walking. The others followed, spreading out behind him like a gathering storm. The 3 men at the gate froze where they stood. Their laughter died on their lips as Ryder's heavy boots echoed against the pavement, slow, deliberate, unrelenting. He spoke one word when he came to a stop only feet away. Low and rough and final. "Move!" The man in the hoodie tried to smirk, tried to say something clever, but one look in Ryder's eyes silenced him faster than a punch ever could. Behind Ryder, the rest of the bikers loomed like shadow. Mace was a bald giant, with tree trunks for arms, one hand resting on a motorcycle handle. His muscles were coiled and ready. The other biker was young, long-haired, quiet, crossing his arms and cocking his head just a little. His eyes were cold, emotionless. It didn't take long. The thugs stepped back, mumbling excuses, unable to meet his gaze. Ryder nodded once, then turned toward Laura, still kneeling by the glass doors, barely conscious. He bent down, lifting her up gently, one arm around her shoulder. "She's going in," he said quietly. The automatic doors slid open, as if the building itself knew better than to refuse him. Inside, the hospital staff rushed forward, nurses with stretchers, doctors shouting orders, and little Sophie clung to her mother's hand until she disappeared behind the emergency curtain. Outside, bikers remained stationary, a silent wall between the chaos of the world and the safety of this little girl. The black leather vests shone under a harsh midday sun, not for outlawed insignia, but for protection. When Ryder finally stepped back outside, Sophie ran straight into his arms. She was crying again, but this time her tears were made of relief. "Thank you," she whispered. Ryder smiled softly and brushed a tear from her cheek. "You're braver than most grown men I know," he said. He didn't stay long, just long enough to make sure Laura was safe. Before he left, he pressed a folded $20 bill into Sophie's tiny hand. On it, written in black ink, were 3 simple words: "For Mum's medicine." A few moments later, the engines roared to life again, thunder echoing off the hospital wall. The staff stood at the window, silently watching the riders disappear into the horizon. That day, they didn't just see bikers. They saw something pure, something real. Because in a world that often turns its back on pain, 5 men had stopped. And in stopping, they changed a life. That evening, when Laura opened her eyes, Sophie was still by her side, the note clutched in her hand like a treasure. "Who helped us?" Laura asked softly. Sophie smiled through her tears. "Angels, Mommy," she whispered. "Hell's angels. If this story has touched your heart, and if you believe kindness can come from the most unexpected souls, then like, share, and subscribe to Real Kindness Stories. Because sometimes all it takes is one act of courage to change someone's forever."